Hello, my name is Mark. Welcome to my shop. Today's video is not an upgrade video. It's not a maintenance video. It's an education video. What you're about to see is a synopsis of several months of collaboration between 4 individuals: a hydronic heating system engineer, a chemical engineer, an automotive technician, and myself. What's this video about? Convector connection corrosion. This is the Achilles heel of the Alde heating system as New Camp has installed it in our tab trailers. People fear it. People work hard to prevent it. So in this video, we're going to talk about what convector connection corrosion is, what causes it, and in part 2, we're going to talk about preventative issues, preventative methods. So let's get started. This is not an Alde training course. Most of us know how the Alde operates. In general, there is electric and a propane boiler, combination unit that heats a liquid, pumps that liquid around a loop through radiators, and the radiators heat your room. That's all we're going to talk about, how the Alde operates. If you need to know more information about how the Alde operates, that's available online all over the place. But we're going to talk about this specific issue. Now, this issue has been difficult to track down. Number one, it doesn't occur on all trailers. It doesn't occur on the same year trailer. For example, I may have an old trailer that's got 5-year-old fluid in it. I've never touched the fluid and I don't have a problem. But you meet somebody else that has a 2-year-old trailer that already has the problem. It doesn't seem to be attached to usage. Some people have their system sitting for years and they don't have trouble. Some have it sitting for years and they do. Some people use their trailers a lot and some people don't use them at all. It doesn't seem to be tied to the heater itself, as if the heater itself were bad, everybody's trailer would have it. That's not the case. It doesn't seem to be tied to usage because everyone who uses their trailer doesn't have the same problem at the same rate. It doesn't even seem to be tied to the type of glycol that's in there. You know that Trauma, when they bought Alde, they changed the glycol type to a new style that's supposedly better, and who knows, right? They won't publish anything about it. But what we found is that the old style fluid and the new style fluid suffer from the same problem at about the same rate. So because of these unknown factors and unknown reasons, a lot of fictional data, a lot of wives' tales have cropped up and are prevalent across the fleet. People, they know it's a problem and it's expensive to fix, and so they all have their own theories about what's going on and what causes it and how to prevent it. So in typical engineering fashion, I got together with a team and we went through this, and we have some information, education, that will help this issue. So first off, we need to talk about metal corrosion. There are lots of different kinds of metals in your Alde. There is a stainless steel boiler. There's a brass an automatic air bleed valve. There are aluminum connectors. There are aluminum convectors. I want to straighten out that term convector. In America, we call them radiators, but the Alde's made in Europe, so they call them convectors. Each metal has its own ability to resist corrosion. Aluminum happens to be least able to withstand corrosion. It's sort of not the softest metal there, but it is most likely to corrode. It corrodes before most other metals in the Alde system do. So let's talk about that corrosion in general. Let's say that this is a pipe and there is fluid in it. Well, what is that fluid? In hydronic heating systems, this is a mix. This is water, a chemical called propylene glycol, and what are called corrosion inhibitors. Corrosion inhibitors. Now, we all know that when water comes in contact with aluminum over time, that aluminum will start to corrode. Well, inside this fluid are chemicals, molecules, floating around free in the fluid. And how these work, they're typically, for those chemists out there, those inhibitors are sometimes called triazoles, nitrates, benzoates, benedates, molybdates, phosphates, and silicates. So this formulation varies depending on manufacturer, but they all do the same thing. And specifically, the material that we need to be talking about that prevents this corrosion inside aluminum pipes is called a phosphate silicate mix. This is the main component inside these systems. These silicates and phosphates, they work by forming a protective blanket that actually insulates the metals from the coolant. So what happens is that these silicates flow inside the pipe and connect themselves to the pipe itself. They form a coating, right? Now, so that the water can't even get to the metal, it forms a blanket and insulates the water from the metal. That prevents corrosion. Well, the issue is that this water is moving, bubbling, and there's vibration in your trailer, and these silicates break off and they leave and they form little flakes of scale. Well, as long as you have free silicates still in the solution, it'll fill in the gap. So as the scale leaves, new silicates form in. That's why you have to change your fluid every couple years, because this process, two things are happening. One is that you're running out of silicates in solution because they're attaching themselves to the metal pipe. And two, scale is building up. As silicate connects to the pipe, it stays there for a while, it gets bumped off as scale, and a new molecule comes in and takes its place, all protecting the metal. Eventually, one of two things will happen. One, your system will plug up with scale, or two, you'll run out of silicates. So you need to be flushing your system and replacing it so you get new silicates and you get rid of that. pretty straightforward. So now you know how corrosion works in these systems, how it works against aluminum, and how the phosphate silica mix in these transfer fluids help. But it doesn't explain everything that's going on with an Alde. Number one, let's assume that this is a piece of aluminum pipe, and there's transfer fluid in it. If the transfer fluid were bad, like trauma is trying to tell us that the original stuff is not good and the new stuff is better, you would see corrosion inside that pipe. When you take a corroded system apart and you look deep inside the pipe, you'd see pinholes and holes all along. So I'm going to leave you a couple of photos here that show you what this convector corrosion looks like right here. So if this problem were caused by the fluid, either the old fluid or the new fluid, this problem would be throughout the aluminum, but it's not. It is only where the pipes connect to the rubber. That's a significant clue. Let's show you what's going on with that. We need to talk a little bit about these chemicals that are in the fluid. This is a water molecule. It's an oxygen molecule and 2 hydrogen molecules. It's a dinky, dinky, dinky little molecule. It can go everywhere. If you have a little crack in your system or pinhole or anything, water is going to come out. Why? Because that molecule is so small. The next material that's in your Alde, in the transfer fluid, is something called propylene glycol. It is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and look at the size of this molecule. A water molecule is really dinky. A propylene glycol molecule is much bigger. It's going to be important. Now, the third thing that we need to talk about is the silicate and phosphate molecule. Take a look at this molecule. This is triphenyl phosphate. This is a very common anti-corrosion phosphate that's actually doing the work inside your Alde transfer fluid. Look at the size of that molecule. Carbon, 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 oxygen, 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 hydrogen, hydrogen. This thing is monstrous. Hydrogen is a little dinky molecule. Triphenyl phosphate is giant. That's important because here's what's going on. What happens is that, let's say, and I've got a clear pipe here. This is not what your Alde looks like, but it is a model of it so you can see what's going on inside. Inside your Alde heater, there is rubber EPDM hose and aluminum pipes, and this would be your convector out here. This is where corrosion occurs in Alde. It doesn't occur in the tank. It doesn't occur in the pipes. It occurs only at this location. Why is that? Well, typical Alde, typical in an Alde, you've got this press fit with a these kind. This is not exactly the style you've got, but that is a hose clamp. So you've got a hose clamp over here. Let me do an experiment for you, so we can show you what's going on. Now, in a true Alde system, you'd have one of these style connectors on it, not one of the worm screw type. But look close. If this pipe, this hose, comes straight out from that pipe, this is a good seal. But if I bend this, do you see the gap that occurs between the inside of the hose and the aluminum pipe? Well, guess what gets in that gap? Guess what gets in there? This is what's going on. Here is your solid aluminum pipe. Here is your hose. Here's your clamp. Transfer fluid gets into this gap. And that gap is really small. In fact, that gap gets smaller and smaller and smaller as it gets closer and closer to the clamp. So you've got basically a wedge. At some point, it's too tight where the clamp is for any of the liquid to get in there. But a water molecule is really small, so it can go. Let's talk about that gap again. Here's that gap. A water molecule can get way down in here, but the propylene glycol molecule, which is much bigger, can only go this far. And the anti-corrosion, the triphenyl phosphate, is a huge molecule, so it can only get here. So what happens right here on this aluminum pipe? You have water in direct contact with aluminum without any silicate or phosphate protection. So this water starts eating that aluminum over time. The other thing that happens is that after a couple of years, you flush this system out. You dump out the old stuff and you put new stuff in. That water that's trapped in there, that doesn't get flushed. So what you get is you get really old transfer fluid trapped in the area between the hose and the nipple. And flushing it doesn't get it because it's just too small. You can never, up here in this close end where it's really small, you can never get the huge phosphate molecule even into that gap. So your radiator tips, your convector tips, start corroding away, and flushing your system doesn't help. Putting in a different style of fluid doesn't help, because that fluid, none of its protective molecules can even get to that joint. That, in a nutshell, is what's going on with these convectors. If you look at the videos, if you look at the pictures of people that have had this issue, those people that have hoses that directly connect have less trouble than people that have a sharp bend on them. And if you notice in the photos, let's look at this photo, that if you've got a sharp bend, that bump that's typical of the first indicator of corrosion going on under there always starts on this end. And you can see why that is, because that is the gap that's created. So what can you do? Well, we're going to leave that for part 2. There's some things that will help and some things that will cure this. I know this video is getting long, but I want to help put all of the false rumors and speculation aside. This is why an Alde system has its convector connectors corroded. The corrosion doesn't occur in the rest of the system. It occurs in this one spot, and this is why. It has to do with that gap that's letting fluid get in and not allowing the larger phosphate molecules to also get in. It's trapping once it gets all corroded in there, and that corrosion makes kind of a sponge material. Once that starts happening, then no amount of flushing here will get that water out of this. So in part 2, we'll go through what you can do to help and some tests that we are running to see if it can actually stop it. Stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Drive safe.